Hello, and welcome to Cozy Night Tales. I am Zahir, and tonight we will explore the life of Alexander the Great, from his birth in Macedonia to the vast empire he later ruled. Together, we will look at the cities he established, the lands he guided, and the lasting legacy he left across regions, discovering how a single life influenced history for generations. Before we begin our journey tonight, let's take a moment to unwind and release the weight of the day. Right now, there are no tasks to complete, no responsibilities waiting. By simply resting in bed with your eyes closed, you are already giving your body the rest it needs. Breathe in slowly and allow the day to gently fade away. The noise of life, the thoughts that move restlessly, all begin to settle, like dust drifting through a quiet beam of light. Feel your breath find its rhythm, soft, steady, and calm. Each exhale lets go of what no longer belongs to this moment. Each inhale brings in stillness, open and clear. Imagine yourself under a wide evening sky. The air is cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of earth and wind. The horizon glows with soft gold, and above it, the first stars emerge, distant, peaceful, enduring. You stand at the edge of time, where dreams and memories blend into one slow current moving toward rest. The heart feels lighter. The mind opens gently. Here, you do not need to strive or reach, only to exist. The world moves quietly around you, and you remain part of it, calm, grounded, infinite. Let the silence between breaths grow wider now, until it becomes a gentle sea. Drift on it, effortless and free. The night surrounds you as it once surrounded kings and travelers, poets and dreamers, each pausing to listen to the quiet between the stars. In this stillness, there are no beginnings and no endings, only the peaceful sense of being carried continually toward light. Now that we have taken time to relax and find calm in the space around us, let us begin our story in the quiet hills of Macedonia, where morning mist hung above olive groves and pale rivers mirrored the rising sky. A child was born under a summer moon. It was the 20th or 21st of July, 356 BC, in the city of Pella, the center of a kingdom, set between the mountains of Greece and the expansive lands beyond. The boy was Alexander, son of King Philip II and Queen Olympias, destined for a name remembered through centuries. From the beginning, his arrival felt marked by the unusual. On that same night, the temple of Artemis at Ephesus burned, a fire later viewed as an omen. Olympias, the queen, dreamed of serpents coiling around her child and of voices carried by the night wind. Philip, always a ruler, watched the boy with careful respect, aware that history often chose its figures quietly, in small moments before the world recognized them. Alexander's earliest years were shaped by both wonder and expectation. The city of Pella buzzed with movement, merchants selling goods from faraway places, poets sharing tales of heroes, and the steady rhythm of Macedonian life in the fields and hills. In this world, Alexander moved freely, observing the surroundings that would influence the leader he would become. Alexander watched the movements of birds as they shifted over the hills, listening to the quiet flow of the rivers and noticing the shapes of clouds drifting above the mountains. Even as a child, he seemed to observe details others often missed, the way a tree leaned toward the sunlight, the rhythm of a bird's song, or the faint tracks of animals in the earth. The young prince was not separated from responsibility. Philip expected him to understand the importance of his heritage, the duties that came with being Macedon's heir. Yet, his mother's influence offered another form of guidance, one shaped by belief and vision. Olympias spoke to him about destiny and purpose, about the possibility that one life could leave a lasting mark on the world. To her, he was already remarkable, a link between the human and the divine. Even as he played in the fields outside Hela, Alexander showed traits that hinted at the leader he would one day become. His mind stayed alert, his gaze steady, and his curiosity constant. He challenged himself and those around him through small tests, learning by watching, thinking, and acting with care. When difficulty appeared, he responded with patience rather than haste, with consideration instead of impulsiveness. One story from his early years carried special meaning for those who saw him grow. The young Alexander tamed Bucephalus, a horse known for its size and fierce spirit. Many adults had attempted and failed, but Alexander approached the challenge differently. He noticed the animal's uneasiness and took time to earn its trust. When he finally sat upon the horse, the connection was immediate and steady. The lesson was simple yet significant. True leadership required understanding, empathy, and courage, traits that would guide him long after he left the hills of Macedonia. As the sun lowered behind the mountains, casting stretched shadows over the city, Alexander often paused to look toward the horizon. The world beyond the hills felt endless, filled with questions and opportunities. Although still young, he sensed that his life would not be ordinary, that the paths he followed would reach far beyond familiar borders. And so, under the early skies of Macedonia, a vision began to form, quiet yet powerful, of a life that would leave a mark remembered through history. As the seasons passed over the calm hills and wide plains of Macedonia, Alexander grew taller, stronger, and more aware of his surroundings. The boy who once wandered the rivers and studied the birds above now began to understand the shape of human knowledge itself. His curiosity deepened, and soon he came under the guidance of one of the era's most respected thinkers. At 13, Alexander was placed under the instruction of Aristotle, the philosopher whose teachings covered subjects from the sky to the earth. In the shaded groves of Mysa, among olive trees and soft whispering grass, Aristotle spoke of ethics, governance, and the natural world. His tone was calm and thoughtful, encouraging Alexander to explore ideas rather than control them, to question instead of accept without thought. With this steady guidance, Alexander learned to follow the patterns of the stars and the paths of rivers, to study plants and animals, and to consider how people organized their societies and the rules that shaped their lives. Aristotle encouraged him not only to gain knowledge, but to understand its purpose, how learning could shape action, and how reflection could support decision-making. Alexander absorbed these teachings with steady focus, his mind open to ideas, philosophies, and observations from many areas of human thought. Alongside philosophy, Alexander's education strengthened his natural leadership. He studied justice, the duties of rulers, and the need to balance ambition with restraint. He was guided to debate, to listen closely, and to consider viewpoints beyond his own. Through these exercises, he developed patience, discernment, and the quiet influence of persuasion. Even during moments of rest, Alexander's mind remained engaged. He read poetry and history, heard stories from travelers and scholars, and asked questions about lands far from Macedonia. Accounts of Egypt, Persia, and the distant East interested him, allowing him to see the links between different peoples and the connections between cultures. His world expanded with each lesson, each story, each observation. His training in writing, military drills, and observing leadership firsthand gave him discipline, focus, and determination. His bond with Bucephalus continued, reminding him of the patience and skill needed to guide both a horse and a challenge. These years of structured learning and preparation formed a young man capable of leading soldiers, planning campaigns, and managing the responsibilities of a kingdom. In the open fields and wooded paths near Mysa, Alexander's education stretched beyond books. He studied strategy, history, and government, while observing landscapes, rivers, and the towns of Macedonia. His curiosity and learning prepared him to lead, plan, and make decisions within the complex world of kingship. As he neared adulthood, the foundations were set for a ruler ready to take the crown, equipped with the knowledge, training, and experience needed to guide Macedonia into the future. In 336 BC, after the assassination of his father Philip II, Alexander became king of Macedonia at the age of 20. The kingdom he inherited was strong, yet surrounded by possible dangers, and the Greek city-states remained divided in their support. As the new ruler, Alexander acted quickly to secure his authority, showing the decisiveness that defined the early period of his reign. He worked to confirm the loyalty of the Macedonian army, maintained the support of Greek allies, and removed any potential rivals whose claims could weaken his position. Alexander's first goal as king was stability. He knew inherited power alone would not keep Macedonia and the wider Greek territories united. He strengthened the army, organizing his forces and appointing commanders who were both loyal and capable. Supplies, equipment, and logistics were managed with care, ensuring Macedonia was prepared for defense and for the campaigns that awaited. His leadership combined inherited authority with practical action, showing that command was both a right and something earned through skill. From his base in Pella, the administrative and political center of Macedonia, Alexander organized these early efforts. Pella remained a busy hub. Envoys from city-states moved through the palace. Plans were created for governing new territories, and the streets and markets reflected a kingdom active and focused. The young king had little time for leisure. The duties of leadership required constant attention to military readiness, diplomacy, and administration. Although Macedonia was secure under his early measures, Alexander's aims reached beyond the kingdom he had received. Philip II had started preparations for a campaign against the Persian Empire, and Alexander quickly began readying himself for this mission. He examined maps, studied the resources of the empire he intended to face, and consulted with his generals to understand the strategies needed for success. Each step showed both planning and ambition, arranging supplies, strengthening garrisons, and coordinating with Greek allies who would accompany him into new lands. Alexander's leadership approach was methodical. He blended inherited knowledge with observations from his education and early experiences. Even as a young ruler, he demonstrated the organizational ability and strategic thinking that would allow him to lead large armies and govern wide territories. His preparation during these initial months created the foundation for the campaigns that would take him across Asia and into Egypt, Persia, and beyond. By the end of his first year as king, Macedonia was securely under his authority. The Greek allies were aligned with his leadership, and the army was ready for movement. Alexander's authority was no longer symbolic. It was practical, disciplined, and capable of supporting both the ambitions he inherited and those he set for himself. The responsibilities of leadership, the preparation for expansion, and the management of allies and resources marked his shift from prince to king, from heir to an active builder of an empire. Even at this early stage, Alexander's vision was extensive. He now stood at the beginning of campaigns that would test his ability to lead, organize, and plan across unfamiliar regions. These first months as king were formative. He learned the weight of authority, the need for decisive action, and the importance of careful planning in war and governance. The young ruler who once trained with generals and tamed his first horse now faced the greater task of leading men and nations. From Pella, the city in Hallstatt, had seen his youth now carried the duties of kingship. The groundwork for Macedonia's expansion was being set as the young king prepared to begin a journey that would take him far from home. Every decision, every command, and every alliance became a step toward the campaigns that would define his life and create a legacy remembered for centuries. After securing his position as king and confirming the loyalty of the Greek allies, Alexander began to carry out the plans. His father's plans had already been set in motion, and Alexander continued them with purpose. His goal was clear: to extend Macedonian influence eastward and confront the Persian Empire. Through steady preparation, he organized his army, selected commanders, and ensured that supplies and logistics were properly arranged. His leadership in these early campaigns combined inherited authority with practical steps to maintain unity among his troops and allies. Alexander led his forces through Thrace and into Asia Minor, traveling from city to city, crossing rivers, and moving through unfamiliar terrain. Along the route, he kept order among the communities he encountered, respecting local customs when it was strategically useful and including regional leaders. In his administration, he did not create new systems of governance. Instead, he adapted existing structures to fit the needs of his expanding empire. This method allowed him to keep control of conquered regions while preparing for further progress. One of the most significant stops on this path was Egypt. Alexander entered a land rich in history, where the people accepted his authority and welcomed him as a ruler. Here, he established Alexandria, designing the city as a center for administration, trade, and culture. Its position along the Mediterranean coast made it an ideal location for communication and commerce, and Alexander appointed officials to manage its early development. Alexandria was intended to serve as a lasting foundation, linking the local population with the broader Hellenistic world through governance and trade. Beyond Egypt, Alexander advanced into the core of the Persian Empire. He passed through major cities and fertile river valleys, observing systems of governance and commerce that had existed for centuries. His campaign succeeded. In military terms, he remained undefeated, reflecting the discipline, planning, and coordination that shaped his leadership. Although battles occurred, the emphasis here is on the practical outcomes: the integration of territories, the appointment of administrators, and the management of resources needed to maintain control over newly claimed lands. Alexander also founded new settlements and restructured existing towns in strategic locations, ensuring that the infrastructure of his empire could support both military and civil administration. These centers were not only symbolic, they served as hubs for governance, trade, and communication, helping to link distant regions under his rule. While doing so, he continued learning from local scholars, engineers, and officials, studying geography, customs, and practices that shaped his choices in administration and urban development. By the time he reached Egypt and entered the Persian heartland, Alexander had transformed Macedonia from a regional kingdom into the base of one of history's largest empires. His focus on logistics, administration, and the founding of cities allowed him to sustain campaigns across wide and varied territories. Even as he continued his conquests, he ensured that the lands he governed were organized, functional, and ready for future expansion. The foundations laid during these The early campaigns formed the foundation for later expansions into Central Asia, parts of South Asia, and northwestern India. Every city he established, every administrative choice he made, and every settlement he reorganized reflected a ruler focused on practical governance and effective results. The young Macedonian king had become a leader capable of directing armies and managing territories on a scale not seen before, preparing the way for an empire stretching from Greece to the borders of India. After securing control over Macedonia, the Greek city-states, and Egypt, Alexander shifted his focus eastward, ready to push deeper into the Persian Empire. With careful planning, he organized his forces, ensured supplies were arranged, and coordinated with his commanders. The disciplined Macedonian troops marched alongside Greek allies whose loyalty Alexander had deliberately maintained. Each movement of the army required thoughtful planning, and each city or region they entered needed attention to administration, resources, and local systems of governance. His campaign led him through the core of Persia, where he encountered long-established cities that had served large populations for centuries. Major centers such as Susa and Persepolis held significant wealth and cultural influence, and Alexander approached them with both authority and practical considerations. Instead of completely dismantling these cities, he integrated local officials into his administration, preserving continuity and stability. Organized taxation, supply systems, and communication networks allowed him to hold these territories even as the campaign advanced farther east. The conquest of Persia was not only a military effort, it also required careful study and adaptation. Alexander observed engineering methods, irrigation systems, and administrative practices, recognizing that effective governance would be necessary to manage such varied lands. He depended on Macedonian and Greek officers, but also incorporated experienced local administrators, understanding the value of their knowledge in managing an expanding empire. From Persia, Alexander continued into Central Asia, advancing through Bactria and Sogdiana. These areas introduced new difficulties, rough landscapes, wide deserts, and mountain barriers. The army's movements were planned with precision, as supply routes extended across long distances and new cities were founded to protect key locations. These settlements acted as garrisons, administrative centers, and communication points, enabling Alexander to govern regions far from Macedonia. The creation of these cities also encouraged the arrival of Greek settlers, soldiers, and officials, leaving a lasting mark of Hellenistic culture and administration across the area. In the northern regions of the Indian subcontinent, Alexander continued to observe local systems of governance and social structure. As he crossed rivers such as the Hydaspes, he coordinated with regional leaders to secure passage and manage supplies. These interactions were practical in nature. He often kept established officials in place, relied on local expertise, and assigned his own officers to supervise administration. This approach allowed the army to advance efficiently while maintaining stable governance for the local population. The founding of cities remained a key part of Alexander's strategy. Beyond Alexandria in Egypt, which had already become an important port and administrative center, he established additional cities throughout Central Asia and along the Indus River. Each settlement was designed with multiple purposes in mind, encouraging trade, supporting military activities, and creating a structured base for regional administration. These cities became lasting markers of his campaigns and showed his ability to connect conquest with effective governance. By the age of 30, Alexander had built one of the largest empires in history, stretching from Greece to northwestern India. He remained undefeated in battle, demonstrating his strategic abilities and the discipline of his forces. However, his accomplishments went beyond military victories. His administrative planning, city building, and organizational efforts ensured that the territories he ruled functioned under a unified framework. Trade routes continued to operate, communication systems were maintained, and local governance was adapted to fit within his broader structure. Even as the army pushed farther east, Alexander kept studying the lands he ruled. He observed rivers, terrain, and urban centers, gathering information that helped guide decisions about settlements, taxation, and administration. He consulted engineers, scholars, and officials, ensuring that the regions under his control remained organized and secure. His ability to apply practical knowledge in managing a vast empire reflected the blend of ambition, planning, and leadership that shaped his campaigns. By the end of these eastern campaigns, the territories under Alexander's rule were connected through a network of cities, roads, and administrative systems. Each region retained aspects of its local governance while being integrated into a larger structure under his authority. His influence extended not only through military conquest, but also through practical administration, city planning, and resource management. The Macedonian king who had begun his reign in Pella had now shaped an empire that crossed continents, establishing cultural and administrative links that would last long after his death. After years of campaigning across Persia, Central Asia, and northwestern India, Alexander returned to Babylon, which served as both an administrative and cultural center of his vast empire. There, he focused on organizing the territories he had brought under his control, overseeing the governance of regions that stretched across great distances. From Greece to the Indus Valley, Babylon became the center from which Alexander directed the administration of provinces, the founding of new cities, and the coordination of trade routes across his extensive territories. Already a city of wealth and influence, Babylon now served as the administrative hub of his empire. While in Babylon, Alexander continued consolidating control. He appointed officials to manage cities and regions, organized the flow of resources, and maintained communication with distant areas. His administrative approach ensured cooperation between Macedonian and Greek officers and local leaders, helping sustain stability. Although military campaigns had expanded his authority, governing these lands required planning, oversight, and organization, responsibilities he approached with the same strategic mindset as his battlefield decisions. However, Alexander's health began to decline. In 323 BC, at the age of 32, he fell ill in Babylon. Ancient accounts mention a worsening fever, though historians still debate the exact cause. Possibilities include malaria, typhoid, or another illness. Even during his sickness, he continued addressing state matters as long as he could, showing the persistence that had characterized his rule. His death left the empire without a clear successor, which led to uncertainty and, ultimately, the division of his territories among his generals, known as the Diadochi. Despite his passing, Alexander's influence endured. The cities he founded, especially Alexandria in Egypt, grew into major centers of trade, administration, and culture. These cities supported the movement of goods, people, and ideas across regions that had once been separate. Many settlements he established in Central Asia and along the Indus River functioned as military, administrative, and economic bases, creating networks that kept the empire operating long after his death. The systems he put in place enabled the spread of Hellenistic culture. Greek language, customs, and administrative methods blended with local traditions, shaping art, architecture, governance, and commerce for generations. Scholars, merchants, and travelers moved along the routes he secured, sharing knowledge and linking distant regions. In this way, Alexander's influence extended well beyond the lands he personally ruled, impacting societies across multiple continents for centuries. Alexander's military record remained unmatched. He never lost a battle, reflecting his careful planning, disciplined execution, and ability to coordinate large armies across varied landscapes. Yet his legacy was not defined by military success alone. It also rested on the networks, cities, and administrative systems he developed. His campaigns connected continents, encouraged cultural exchange, and created enduring structures that shaped regions from Greece to India. By the end of his life, the young king who began his journey in Pella had achieved extraordinary reach. His decisions in city founding, administration, and territorial organization allowed his vast empire to function as a unified system even after his death. Although the empire eventually divided, the cities, networks, and cultural links he created continued to influence governance, trade, and culture for many centuries. Alexander's life was short, but his achievements were extensive. From his beginnings in Macedonia to the far reaches of Asia, he broadened the scope of connection, governance, and cultural exchange across regions. The empire he ruled, though later divided, reflected the magnitude of his achievements, the reach of his ambition, and the practical leadership that enabled him to unify and administer such varied lands. His influence remained visible in cities, trade networks, and the spread of Hellenistic knowledge long after his final days in Babylon. Even today, thousands of years later, the name Alexander the Great holds a lasting significance, and his life continues to be a reference for rulers, scholars, and historians. His accomplishments were measured not only by the territories he controlled or the battles he won, but also by the durable systems, cities, and networks he created. From the Mediterranean coasts of Greece to the rivers of India, his impact shaped trade, culture, and governance for generations. In the quiet of Babylon after his death, the empire he had built continued to function, a testament to the scale of his vision and the practical skill with which he guided it. Although his life was short, Alexander's story endures as a reminder of the remarkable potential of human ambition, organization, and perseverance. I hope you've enjoyed this sleep story and that it has brought you a peaceful night's rest. Please join me again tomorrow for another sleep story. Until then, sweet dreams.